The air inside the canyon felt dense, like warm, damp cotton. The Arizona sun beat down, but here, deep in the shadows of the rock face, there was only the cold stillness of ancient stone. Elias Thorne moved with the quiet efficiency of a man who belonged to the wild, not just visited it. His canvas pants, thick leather boots, and decades of experience were his only armor. He was halfway through a multi-day solo trek, recording footage for a new series on desert survival. His canteen was low, and his focus was on a narrow ledge leading to a seep of water. He took a single, unhurried step around a granite boulder. That's when the world contracted to a single sound, the dry, unmistakable warning of a Mojave rattlesnake. It wasn't the slow, drawn-out rattle you hear in a documentary. It was a vibrating blur, a sound that said, "I was here first and you are already too late." Before his brain could process the sight, a diamond pattern of tan and olive coiled in the shade, the fangs had struck. Not his ankle, which his boots protected, but the soft, unprotected flesh of his right hand, where he had briefly rested it on the rock. He looked down. 2 tiny pinpricks were already starting to bleed sluggishly just below his index finger knuckle. The snake was already uncoiling, its head raised, ready for a second strike, but Elias slowly pulled his hand back, keeping the movement fluid, non-threatening. The snake, satisfied, slithered into a crevice. It was gone. Elias was alone, 5 miles from the nearest trail, with a venom load from one of the most toxic snakes in North America. The venom of a Mojave is infamous. It's not just a hemotoxin tearing apart tissue, it also contains a potent neurotoxin that begins to shut down the nervous system, leading to muscle weakness, vision problems, and eventually respiratory failure. His heart started to pound, not with fear but with a sudden razor-sharp focus. This was it. Not a drill. Not a lecture. This was his final exam. Minutes to survive. He looked at his hand. The pain was already a throbbing, relentless hammer. He knew what every movie, every outdated book would tell him to do. Cut it open. Suck the venom out. Apply a tight tourniquet. Elias Thorne smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, because he knew that following any of that conventional wisdom would be his first and fatal mistake. The first 2 minutes were a masterclass in controlled response. Minute 1, the status check. Elias forced himself to take inventory. No radio signal. Cell phone useless. His pack contained a comprehensive survival kit, including a small vial of ephedrine and his medical kit, but no anti-venom, that was only available at a hospital. He checked the bite marks again. 2 clearly defined. The swelling was already beginning to appear, a subtle puffiness around the knuckle. His internal clock was running. He had perhaps 3 to 5 hours before the neurotoxin could begin to seriously compromise his breathing. Minute 2, the rejection of false hope. He consciously rejected the snake bite kit. The suction devices, the cutting blades, they are all worse than useless. The motion of cutting would only introduce infection and rupture capillaries, potentially pushing venom deeper into the tissue. The suction device has been proven ineffective in removing more than a tiny fraction of the venom. He quickly pulled out a small notepad and a satellite beacon from his pack. He could not run. He could not panic. His objective was simple. Slow the venom, get to help. Rule 1. No tourniquet. His hand was throbbing. He knew the immediate temptation was to stop the blood flow. But he forced his hand away from his arm. A tight tourniquet does not stop the flow of venom in the lymph system. It cuts off the arterial blood supply. This traps the hemotoxin in the limb, concentrating the cellular destruction and guaranteeing amputation, while allowing the neurotoxin to circulate freely. His decision was final: venom must flow. It must be diluted into the system so the body can fight it, rather than isolating it to destroy the hand. Rule 2. No cutting or sucking. He remembered a documentary where a man died from an infection after attempting to cut and suck the venom out. He also remembered a study proving that attempting to suck out venom removes less than 0.01% of the total dose. He needed to minimize movement, not create new wounds for bacteria. Minute 3, the slow down. Elias knew the primary vector for venom spread was the lymphatic system, which relies on muscle movement to circulate. Every step, every flexing of his hand was a pump for the toxin. He sat down, immediately stabilizing his hand. He pulled out a medical bandage and a rigid metal splint from his kit. Immobilization. He splinted his right arm and hand to a straight plank, ensuring the hand was slightly below heart level to maintain circulation but above the ground. Movement is the enemy. Cleaning. He gently cleaned the bite marks with a small antiseptic wipe, careful not to rub or apply pressure. The calm. He inhaled slowly, a technique he learned years ago, focusing on the scent of desert sage and dry earth. This wasn't about suppressing fear, it was about controlling his heart rate. A slower pulse means slower circulation, which means slower venom distribution. Control isn't about being calm, he thought, echoing a lesson from a near-fatal mountain climb. It's about making the choice to be calm even when the ground is shaking. He couldn't wait for rescue. His beacon was sending his location, but in this remote region, a helicopter could take hours. He had to cover ground. Elias packed his gear using his left hand and began the slow, agonizing journey toward the main jeep track 3 miles away. He walked at a snail's pace, just faster than standing still, each step a conscious effort to minimize the lymph pump. As the pain intensified, a memory surfaced, not of a combat zone but of a lecture hall. A herpetologist, Dr. Wallace, a man who survived 3 venomous bites, had said, "When a pit viper strikes, the first hour is about the body. The next hour is about the mind." Hour 1, the test. Elias performed the matchstick test. He placed a matchstick between his lips and tried to hold it. If the muscles in his face and throat began to weaken, the matchstick would drop. It was a simple, non-invasive indicator of advancing neurotoxicity. Hour 2, the onset. He felt the first sign, a slight drooping in his right eyelid. The world felt muffled. He stopped immediately. The neurotoxin was gaining traction. He pulled out his vial of ephedrine, a central nervous system stimulant. He knew this was a high-risk, unapproved field procedure. It would raise his heart rate, speeding the venom, but the stimulating effect could counteract the neurotoxin's paralytic action on the respiratory muscles, buying him an hour or more of clear breathing. He paused, holding the vial. His life hung on a pharmaceutical bet. He thought of the guards, the judge, the police officer and the other stories, all defeated by unexpected expertise. His expertise was about to face the ultimate test. He administered the dose. The ephedrine hit him like a jolt of electricity. His heart hammered, his head cleared, but the swelling in his hand was now a balloon of angry, discolored tissue. The risk was enormous. More cellular damage in his hand, but a fighting chance for his lungs. He pressed on. The 2 hours that followed were a blur of focused walking, self-monitoring, and painful steps. He finally crested a small rise and saw it, the glint of sun on the metal of the old jeep track. He was close. He pulled out his satellite phone, now in range, and dialed the emergency number he'd programmed for his beacon company. Snake bite. Mojave, neurotoxicity setting in. Ephedrine administered. Location confirmed. He spoke in clipped, professional terms, giving them the data they needed, not the panic they expected. The rescue helicopter arrived 20 minutes later, a thunderous roar breaking the desert silence. The medical team was already briefed on his self-treatment. On the flight to the trauma center, the flight medic looked at Elias's splinted arm and his organized medical log. "You knew exactly what you were doing," the medic said, shaking his head. Elias, groggy but still clear-headed, looked at his hand, which would take weeks to heal and months of physical therapy to use again. "I just followed the manual," Elias whispered. "The one they never put in the starter kit." He received the appropriate anti-venom, Crofab, at the hospital, the only true treatment for a venomous snake bite. The next week was spent recovering from the physical and neurological assault. He lost the muscle tissue destroyed by the concentrated hematoxin, but the neurotoxin never reached the point of irreversible respiratory failure. His life was saved because when the pressure mounted, he didn't rely on common knowledge. He relied on control, expertise, and the rejection of all false hope. Judge mocks teenager in court, shocked to learn he's a genius attorney in disguise. The journey back to the city was quiet. In moments of crisis, the most dangerous enemy is not the predator. It's ignorance disguised as courage. The man who dies from a venomous snake bite isn't always the one who was the farthest from help. It's the one who grabbed a razor blade and a rubber band, convinced he was a hero. The real survival is not the one broadcast on TV. It is the quiet discipline, the decades of preparation, and the willingness to be still when the world tells you to run. It is the moment you choose science over drama. If this story resonated with you, if it made you rethink what you thought you knew about survival, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's start the conversations that matter, the ones that lead to change, the ones that save lives. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of what we're capable of when we stand for what's right, even when that's just standing still.